Hi there friends, Josh here from Joshua Johnson Outdoors. In today's video, I'm going to be reflecting on my 3 years of experience using the Hilleberg Allak 2, sharing with you the reasons why I decided to sell it, and showing you what tent I replaced it with. Before I get into the video, if you find this content helpful, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe to my channel. This helps ensure that I can continue providing useful information and delivering value, just for you. Okay, so I use my Hilleberg Allak 2 for 3 years. I've used it on frozen lakes, in extreme cold, in dense forest and bush, on dry windy scrublands, and in the snow and ice of the alpine environment. There were 3 main things I liked about the tent, as well as one big thing that I didn't. First, the things I liked. Number 1, quality. Up until I replaced it, the Allak 2 was easily the highest quality tent I've ever owned. In fact, it was more expensive than most cars I've driven. The materials and craftsmanship of the Allak were, and still are, second to none. Number 2, ventilation. Because of the very large doors and overhead vents located at either side of the 2-door tent, the Allak had better ventilation than any 4-season tent I've seen, and for that matter, most 3-season tents as well. This meant that both my gear and I could stay dry and therefore warm, even in a torrential downpour. Number 3, huge vestibules. The 2 cavernous vestibules meant that I could store all of my gear inside, keep everything dry, as well as do all my cooking in the tent, properly ventilated of course, without even getting out of my sleeping bag. This was especially useful in bad weather and very cold conditions. Now the things I didn't like. To be honest, there weren't that many aspects of the tent that I didn't like, but the one main issue that I did have, which was the reason I ended up selling the tent, was set up in high winds. Putting a tent up is often a bit of a learned skill that requires practice. I spent 3 years setting up and tearing down my Allak, so there was no shortage of opportunities for me to get to know what works best. In mild to moderate winds, the Allak set up just fine, but in higher winds, say about 60 to 80 k, I found that because the tent relied so heavily on guy line support, as do most 4-season tents, and the fact that the upper guy lines had to be wrapped around the tent poles before they could be used to provide said support, I sometimes found myself awkwardly trying to hold up the half-erected tent as I tried to sort out the guy lines. If I didn't do this, the wind would completely flatten the tent and bend the poles. Also, the pushing force of the wind and the pulling force from the wrapped guy lines would create tension in a way that resulted in the tent poles repeatedly pulling apart, leaving me with partially disassembled poles that were difficult to manage in high winds. The Hilleberg Solo has the same guy line tent pole configuration, but it's not so much an issue because the tent is much smaller and has less surface area to be exposed to the wind, so setup is much easier to do. The Hilleberg Stika is somewhat similar to the Allak in terms of shape, but it has the advantage that both the top and bottom guy lines are supported by reinforced fabrics and thus don't require being wrapped around the tent poles. To be fair, Hilleberg markets the Allak as a red label tent and not necessarily intended for high to extreme winds. Once set up, the Allak stood up well enough in 80 k winds, but getting it set up in those conditions generally was very difficult. I later discovered a different tent that was better suited to the situations I tend to tent in and much more fit for purpose to my needs. And that tent was the Hilleberg Allak 2.